Let's see if you can tell the difference between expensive plugins and stock plugins, which are the free ones that come with your music software. So I'm going to be using different parts of that loop I made for all the comparisons. Basically, we're going to do a blind listening test for 8 different types of plugins. For each of these effects I've listed, I'm going to be playing you 2 versions. One using an expensive third-party plugin, and one using the stock version of that same effect that comes with my music software. And just the 8 plugins I'm using in this video cost $1,184. So let's find out if that's worth it. And just a disclaimer, this video will be way better if you watch it with headphones on. Any kind of AirPods or whatever you like to use will be good. So you can pause it and get your headphones if you need to. If you can tell the difference between these sounds on phone speakers, then you should be a full-time audio engineer. Anyway, let's do reverb first. Here's the same synth sound with 2 different reverbs on it. So you gotta guess which has the expensive reverb on it, A or B. I'll play it again. So just remember your answers or write them down for each category, and I'll tell you all the answers in a little bit. And I'm genuinely curious how many you can guess right, so comment below the number you get right at the end. I'm also going to show you a blind test I did on myself listening to the exact same audio files. Just only write down which one you think is the expensive version, A or B. So let's do a delay now. I'm going to add a delay to that same sound. That one is pretty hard to tell the difference. You can back up and rewatch this video as many times as you want. That's why I'm leaving the answers till later. Now let's do a stereo imager. So I'll take the chords, but I'm going to add stereo widening to them. Now it's time for a transient shaper. So let's take this hi-hat, and what I'm going to do with the transient shaper is add more attack to it. So you'll see the difference when I add it. So without it, now with it. Now let's see if you can tell the difference between an expensive version of that and a stock one. All right, we've got 4 left. Let's keep them going. So I'm going to take this stab sound, but I'm going to add distortion to it. I'll just say right now, that one is impossible to tell the difference. They sound the exact same. I cannot tell the difference at all. I will say all these synth sounds that you're hearing, from my new serum pack that I've been working on. It's not out yet. It'll be out soon, so be on the lookout for that. I have some amazing sounds in there. I'm just triple checking everything and testing all the sounds in my own songs and making sure they're ready to use and they're as good as possible. And now I'm going to take all these percussion layers here. I really love all those layers in there. But so I'm going to send all those to one bus and then compress them together. All right, 2 left. Let's take the lead pluck. Let's add an EQ to it to make it brighter. Okay, last one. I'm gonna play the full track, but with a different limiter on the master bus to get it up to commercial volume. If you want, you can go back and rewatch any of those that you want and write down your answers, because I'm going to give you all the answers now. I'm also going to show you my own blind test, but let me give you the answers first. So for the reverb, the expensive one was B. And here's what the stock one sounded like. Even listening now in my studio headphones, I can barely tell the difference. And the most important thing was that this stock reverb has this entire output EQ that you can control the reverb bands with. Like if it didn't have this output EQ, it sounds really harsh. But with this EQ, it sounds much more under control and professional. For the delay, the expensive one was A. And here's the stock one. Then for the stereo imager, the expensive one was A. I feel like this one's easier to tell the difference. And here's the stock one. I feel like the expensive stereo widening sounds a lot more professional, so that one's a little easier to tell. The transient shaper was interesting, so the third-party plugin, the expensive one, was B. And here's what the stock one sounds like. So again, this is just adding a tack to that sound. So without it, I mean, I think this stock one sounds just as good as the third-party plugin. It's really hard to tell any difference. Now for the fifth one, which was distortion. B was the expensive one here. And then here's the stock one. I think it sounds the exact same. It's all about dialing in the right settings to get it to sound good. For the compressor, I gave it a pretty hard job because it had to deal with all that fast percussion and all those transients coming in so often. In that case, A was the expensive one, this FabFilter Pro C2 compressor, and then here's the stock one. I did the exact same settings for both compressors, same ratio, attack, release, everything. Now I just have two left. For the EQ, B was the expensive one. It was FabFilter's EQ. And I did the exact same level of EQ cuts and boosts in Logic stock EQ, and it sounded like this. Almost the exact same. I feel like you can tell in these nice headphones that FabFilter's EQ just sounds a little crispier. And last, for the limiter, B was the expensive one here. And here's the stock one. I feel like the overall master just sounds much more muffled with the stock version of the limiter. The highs and the transients of the drums just sound a lot clearer with FabFilter's limiter. So now you can see all the answers. You can tell me down below how many you actually got right out of 8. But now I'm going to show you my blind test I did on myself. And I'll tell you what I've learned from doing all this. All right, just so you guys know, I'm not cheating here. This is the setup. So I've loaded all the audio files that you guys heard into this iTunes Smart playlist. And what this Smart playlist allows me to do is when I delete all the files, it'll repopulate them randomly. So it totally randomizes all of those files every time I delete them. So they're all labeled based on what the effect is. Like there's a compressor here and a compressor here, but by the title, I can't see which is the expensive version and which uses the stock plugin. But if I go into the metadata, then I can look at the comments and see that this is the stock one right here. So that's how I'll check if I got it right or not. So since I just saw the answer for that one, I'm just gonna randomize it again real quick. Maybe one more time for good measure, just to shake things up even more. And just so I can A-B compare everything, like I'm gonna put the effects next to each other. I'm gonna put the delays next to each other, the transient designers next to each other, the limiters next to each other, distortion, stereo imager, EQ, reverb, compressor. So now I'm going to go through and blind test myself and see how many I can get right. And I kind of want to give you my thoughts on why I think some of the sounds sound more expensive than the others. So let's start off with the delay. So I feel like this one has a dead giveaway for me. It's because the first one, the delay sounds wider. And I know Echo Boy has a really nice wide delay sound, where stock plugins usually don't have that nice of a wide delay sound. So I'm gonna go with A being the expensive one here, so we can look if I got it right. And yep, A was the expensive one. I think that one was pretty easy just because I know the plugin so well, and I know it has a nice wide stereo image on that delay. Now let's do the transient designer. This one should be pretty hard. If anything, I think the first one is sounding a little clearer to me. So I'm going to go with A being the expensive one. I'm not sure though. So I got that right. Yeah, it just sounded like a tiny bit clearer to me in the initial attack of that hi-hat. But again, it's really hard to tell. They're both good transient designers. Now for the limiter. Honestly, this should probably be the easiest one to tell the difference. Yeah, that second one is definitely the expensive limiter. The transients and high end of the drums just come through so much clearer with that limiter, and the high end of the drums just sounds like almost muffled on the first limiter. So I'm gonna go with B being the expensive limiter, and that's right. I think that one was probably the easiest one out of all of them to tell. Now for the distortion. Those two distortions sound the exact same. I can literally hear no difference at all. I would just be totally blind guessing if I got that one right. So I'm just not even gonna give that to myself. I have no clue which is the expensive and which is the stock one. All right, I guess the second one was the stock one. I mean, I can't tell the difference at all. Now for the stereo imager. This one should actually be easier to tell. So the stereo image in the second option, I think just sounds a lot wider, but more natural than the first one. There sounds like some weird artifacts going on in the first one. So I'm gonna guess that the second one is the expensive version, which is right. So I feel like that one was a little easier to tell too. Now for the EQ, this should be a hard one. The highs sound like a tiny bit more crisp in the second one, so I'm gonna guess and say the second one is the more expensive EQ, even though those EQs are boosted by the same amount, so they have the exact same settings. I'm just gonna guess that the second one just sounds a little more crisp in the high end to me. And that was right. So I went with my instinct there and I got it right. But again, they sounded pretty similar. Like I could barely tell the difference. Now for the reverb. Yeah, so I think the first one just sounds a little more expensive to me. The character of the reverb sounds nice and smooth. I just like the sound a little better. So I'm gonna go with the first one being the expensive one. So that was right. So yep, that one is Valhalla Vintage Verb, and the other one is the stock reverb. Now for the last effect, the compressor. I think this will be pretty hard to tell the difference. So the difference I'm hearing is really tiny, but the second one sounds a little more transparent. Like I can hear the compressor working in the first one. Like I'm hearing the transients being compressed more, but I feel like an expensive compressor would have the same amount of compression because I know the settings are the exact same in both compressions, but it's more transparent about it. Like you can't really tell the compression is there, which I think is a good thing. So I'm gonna go with the second one being the expensive version. All right, I'm surprised I got that many right. I mean, I did get an advantage by making the sounds, and I use these plugins all the time because they're my favorite plugins, so I know what to look for and listen for. So I definitely had an advantage there. And if I was watching this video on a phone, listening on phone speakers, it's gonna be way harder to tell. Like I think it'd actually be impossible to tell the difference. And when I came up with this video idea, I actually thought it'd be way easier to tell the difference between these plugins. I think it really shows you should think twice before spending a bunch of money on this stuff. It's more about your knowledge of the plugins and how to use them. I will say though, the user interfaces on the expensive plugins are much better looking. They're much more aesthetically pleasing and easier to use, and I feel like they sound great right when you pull them up. Whereas the stock plugins, you have to work a little bit harder to get them to sound good. So my advice from this video would really be to just pick your favorite plugin in each category and learn that plugin like the back of your hand. Like whenever I need a reverb sound, I don't even think twice. I just pull up Valhalla Vintage Verb and dial in the settings I want in like 2 seconds because I know it so well. So limiting the amount of plugins you use will not only help you produce music faster, but it will also help you make better music because you know the features of the plugins you use so well. So I hope you guys enjoyed this one. Thanks for watching. Peace.